because I don't need to experience something if Ted's already done it, right? Like, they tell you that experience is the best teacher. It's the biggest lie that we've ever been told. It's not experience, it's wisdom. Wisdom is the best teacher.
Let's impact some men today. I think we're gonna do a great job.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Modern Man Podcast, where we are here to connect men in pursuit of their potential. If you're one of them, you're in the right place. Really quick before we jump into the podcast, I'm going to encourage you to join us as we embrace discomfort, cultivate community, and put wind in each other's sail. Now, you could do that by hitting that like button, hitting the subscribe button, sharing this podcast, and of course, checking us out each and every single week to get a brand new episode. And don't forget to check out The Noble Knights. This is for the men that are listening. If you're looking for a community to provide support, accountability, and mentorship to help you achieve your goals, The Noble Knights is the place to be. We are a community of like-minded men on a mission to improve ourselves and elevate our capacity for life. And the only thing we're missing is you. Without any further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce someone who's going to put some wind in our sails today. CEO, keynote speaker, Forbes Council member, executive coach, podcast host of Mick Unplugged out of Greenville, South Carolina, my old stomping grounds. It is a pleasure to have Mick Hunt on the podcast. Mick, thanks for joining us, man.
Brother, thanks so much for having me, man. It's a pleasure to be here. And, we were connecting offline and you spent some time in Greenville. I just moved back home to Greenville. So I feel like I've known you my entire life,
Yeah,
brother.
honestly, we probably got some cousins running around and we're like, oh, samesies, right? So we'll be seeing each other at
Right.
the family reunion for sure. um,
Yes,
Mick,
sir.
I
Yes,
want to
sir.
make sure that the audience has an opportunity to get as acquainted with you as I have these past few moments. So I want to give you the podcast, give you the microphone so you can speak directly to the audience, introduce yourself, tell them a little bit about who you are, what you do, and we could jump into our conversation afterwards.
Yeah, man. Like you did a great job on the intro. Like I was looking over my shoulder, like who is this Mick guy he's talking about? Like that guy sounds awesome right there. So kudos for the amazing introduction. But like you said, man, I'm Mick Hunt. I have been an entrepreneur and business owner much of my adult life. And it started with me trying to find a way for my mom. And unlike a lot of people, right? To like you your parents or your mom go through certain situations, or maybe they don't go through situations, and you just feel like, hey, it's your time. And
Mhm.
so for me, it was always, how can I be the best version of myself every day and provide for my family? And for me personally, that providing meant, how do I get my mom in a better place? How do I show my sister and brother what a man is supposed to look like and should do? And so my journey of adulthood started at 10
Yeah.
when I made a promise to my mom to do just that, right? To get her to a better place. And at 10, I didn't know what that was going to be and how that was going to happen, but everything that I've done since then has been to fulfill that mission, to fulfill that promise. So entrepreneur, like you said, keynote speaker, big proponent of mental health. So I do a lot of mental health speaking, have an event coming up with my mentor, Les Brown, um, in mental health. And I have a podcast, right? And so breaking news, Ted, you're going to be the first that actually hears this publicly. Just signed with Urban One Podcast. So Urban One, TV One, Radio One, Reach One, just signed on with them. So I'll be on the same roster with Ricky Smiley's podcast, Dale Hughley's podcast, Kid and Play's
Let's
podcast, and
go.
Amanda Seales' podcast. So excited about that, man. But most importantly today, I'm excited to spend time with you and your listeners and viewers,
Well,
brother.
congratulations. Thank you for sharing the news. You heard it here first on the Modern Man podcast at Mick. That's just fantastic. And something tells me this is just the tip of the iceberg of what you're working on and where we're going to be going here in the future. And I love that how you mentioned that promise you made as a 10-year-old. And I want to go back to that moment. And that's the first question I really wrote down was the significance of a moment and what it could mean for our lives. And we've spoken on this podcast and you being familiar with mental health, but we've spoken a lot about trauma and how as kids we make promises with ourselves and deals with ourselves that don't always serve us moving forward. But then there's the other side of that coin, right? There's some things that we can adopt as children that help us move forward and push forward into a new realm and break generational curses at some point. It ran in my family until it ran into me, right? And and you made
Yep.
that decision at 10 years old. Speak on the significance of that moment and how it shaped the man that you've become today.
Yeah, I remember it very vividly like it was yesterday. It was a Saturday morning. Most kids where we grew up, it was, you're playing basketball outside, you're playing with your friends, or your mom has the Isley brothers or Frankie Beverly and Maze on, and you're cleaning up, right?
Yep.
Like it's a joyous day. Saturdays usually start that way, right? Well, this Saturday was different. I wake up and my mom's sitting at the edge of my bed in tears, like tears flowing down her face, so much so that they then begin flowing down my face. And I tell people this all the time. There's two things. You can be a married couple, but still be a single parent at the same time. And
Mm,
that's what it was like for my mom. The second thing, you can have the nicest house in the neighborhood from the outside, but inside it feels like prison. And that was my house. And so it was December. It was actually the day before Christmas. So it's Christmas Eve, 1988. And my mom's crying. And I won't go into all the details because we can all assume. And, for the first 10 years of my life, my mom went through financial abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse from my father. And so I didn't have to ask my mom what happened. I just knew. Right. And so I begged my mom, I was like, why don't you leave? Take my sister. My brother hadn't been born yet. Take my sister and you guys leave. Let me deal with the monster, right? Because from an ego perspective, if I stay, everything will be okay with my dad, right? Like
mhm.
he didn't lose the family, like there's still someone there. And me being the oldest, I had this plan mapped out, right? Mom, you just leave. My mom looked at me and she said, Mickey, my family calls me Mickey, because I love you, I can't do that. I'm not gonna let you suffer either. Like we're all in this together. And those words were very literal to me at 10 years old. She was like, because I love you. And it stuck with me that purpose, right? That purpose, that because that I speak about now has to mean something. And so I made my mom a promise. And I was like, Mom, I don't know how. I don't know when, I don't know where, but you're gonna have a permanent smile on your face soon. You're gonna be able to walk around and not be on eggshells. You're going to enjoy the life that you're supposed to enjoy and live. And more importantly, for my sister, who was 7 at the time, I'm gonna show her what a real man is supposed to be in a household because I don't want her to feel that this is normal. And to your powerful words, Ted, like I don't want her to feel like it's normal, but more importantly, that it's a generational curse, right? I didn't want that to happen, and so I'm gonna break it. And so that day, that's the promise that I made is that I was gonna change lives. And for me, growing up, I say in South Carolina, growing up in the South, what we saw on TV, right? Success was either you're an athlete, you're an entertainer, you're a doctor or a lawyer.
Mhm.
So I was going to be one of those four things, right? Like I told my mom, I'm going to figure out how to make as much money as I can to get you out of here so that you never have to worry. And that's what I've done. Now, I wasn't any one of those four things, right? I figured out really quickly that owning a business or multiple businesses is a path to financial freedom. But that's that's my story, Ted.
That's fantastic, man. And I come from two immigrant parents from Haiti. So growing up, it was three choices. You're gonna be a doctor, a lawyer, or a failure. And I was like,
Yeah,
let me roll the dice with that third option. I went into TV. My older sister's in med, she's in pharmaceuticals. My other older sister's a dentist. My older brother, he was a Marine, then sheriff's deputy, now firefighter, and I was the outlier that kind of carved my own path. And carving your own path, I think,
yeah,
is so valuable. And I was lucky and I was blessed because being the youngest of four, there wasn't pressure of carving that path or being that example. I was able to go against the grain confidently because
yeah.
of my older brother and my older sisters who've already kind of set the foundation moving forward. For you, at 10 years old, making this promise, you're still a child, but your childhood
Yeah.
ends in a way. Um, what
Yeah.
lesson from that experience has become the foundation for your life's mission, right? At 10 years old, you're giving up your childhood for this promise that you made.
Yeah. What's funny, and I'm gonna date myself or age myself here, right? So most of the people, I'm sure Ted, even you don't remember portable TV sets, right?
Yeah.
So my mom has a portable TV set and she's listening to the man that would come to be my future mentor, like in real life. So she's listening to Les Brown. And, Les has this famous saying, right? And it's, shoot for the stars because or shoot for the moon because even if you miss, you'll land amongst the stars. And so he said that during this episode that she was watching. And so I gave my mom a big hug and I said, I'm going to shoot for the moon because even if I miss, I'll land amongst the stars. And my mom gave me this big hug and she patted me on the back and then she whispered in my ear, she was like, but don't miss. Right. And so all that pressure, right? Don't miss. And here's what's funny, Ted. Again, it's Christmas time. So 2 weeks later, I have a basketball game, right? And I probably missed every shot that I took. And I felt so disappointed and so mad at myself because I promised my mom I wouldn't miss. And then I realized, well, she didn't mean basketball. What she meant was when opportunities come, don't miss. Always be prepared. So what at 10 years old I figured out was being prepared, seeking the opportunities, and more importantly, when you have that opportunity, don't miss. And that comes from planning, that comes from preparation, that comes from thinking, that comes from, strategizing. And so, like all of my friends from middle school, high school, college will tell you, I was always the person that was thinking above what was happening, right? Like I was trying to figure things out. I was trying to solve a problem before a problem existed because I promised my mom I would never miss and that if there was ever an opportunity, I was going to take it. And that's been the pillar of everything that I do.
Yeah, to keep the sports analogy going, you started watching the game instead of watching the ball, and most people get
Right.
caught watching the ball and they're flat-footed and they're not ready to react. And we've heard the quote, "Luck is simply preparation meeting opportunity." And if you're watching the game, you're putting yourself in the position to hit the ball, or you're putting yourself in the position to score when the opportunity comes. A lot of people
Yeah.
find their feet, and I'm going to speak to some of the listeners who might be working on that side hustle, or maybe they're going in and out of work and they're making good money supporting the family, but they still feel empty, and their feet are stuck. They're not able to move their feet for the opportunities that come in front of them. And they might have a why for what they do. I do this for my family, right? I go out there, I get the bag, I come home, and I have my why. But when I come home, I'm not fulfilled. I don't feel tapped in. And you alluded to this before, the because aspect.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
touch on how someone can get that motivation, tap into not just their why, but their because, to motivate them to get their feet moving, watch the game, and take advantage of those opportunities when they arise.
Yeah, man, you hit it on the head, especially with your analogy about watching the game, not just the ball. I personally feel, and I love Simon Sinek, right? Love him. But start with why is just that it's the start. It's like the starting line, and because is what drives you to the finish line, right? Like most people stop at their why because it feels good,
Mhm.
right? And I could probably guess, right? I could probably guess your why is your wife, your kids, your pets, right? But the question is, but why? Right. And so when you put something on the line, when you have something that drives you, that really pushes and not just motivates you, but inspires you, that's your because. And if you have that in front of you, every decision that you make, every word of importance that you're going to speak, that's what separates, I'm going to say, the average from good and the good from exceptional. It's because you're driven by that because. So for the listener that feels like, I'm stuck and I don't know what to do, it's not that you don't know what to do. You actually know what to do, and you probably know how to do it. What you need to do is put your because in front of you and start trying to touch that because. And that's where that action is going to happen. I
Okay.
promise you. Like, I don't do a ton of guarantees, but here's the guarantee I will give you. If you put your because in front of you, not behind you, not beside you, but literally in front of you, and when it comes time to make those crucial decisions that you're going to make as an entrepreneur, that you're going to make as a business leader, that you're going to make for your family, put your because in front of you. You're going to make the right decision and you're going to put the right action
Mm.
to make whatever that thing is happen.
Yeah, and I love that you have the because I've worked in the Noble Knights group, and some of my clients we do what's called a should detox, and it's a simple
Mhm.
form that I send them, and it says I should do X, Y, and Z, and for the audience, fill in something that you've been pushing off. I should go to the gym, or I should call my insurance company and get my rate down, right? And then we change
Right.
the word from should to as I could. I could call
Yeah.
the insurance company. I could go to the gym, right? Gives it a little bit of a feeling. But the magic, Mick, is where we add the because, right? I should go to the gym
Yep.
turns to I could go to the gym, which turns to I could go to the gym because I need to get in shape to walk my daughter down the aisle one day. I should
That's it.
call the insurance company to I could call the insurance company to I could call the insurance company because a lowered rate will allow me to take my wife on a date once a month, which will water our marriage, which has been stagnant here and there. But linking that because automatically adds the value to the action and helps you push forward through it.
Exactly.
How has your because propelled you from that 10-year-old boy making that promise to the wonderful, happy go lucky Mick that we see here, who I imagine whose mom had a lot of smiles throughout the years?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's just like what I just mentioned. It's that every decision I make, I put that because there. And here's the deal, right? As you mature in whatever it is that you're doing, your because probably changes a little bit, right? So, it went from fulfilling a promise, which I've done, now is to providing a legacy for others, right? Like, when I was 10, I didn't have children, thank God. Right. So when I got in my 20s and I had children, it was about, okay, how do I show them what someone's supposed to be? And then, now that I'm in my 40s, it's about how do I leave a legacy for my family to come that I don't know that I'll probably never meet. And so it's using that fire, right? It's using those reasons. It's using that because that gets me there. So that initial promise, it pushed me to, going to college, obviously. It then pushed me into starting businesses in my mid 20s, and I never looked back. So, I started. It's funny you brought up insurance. I started in the insurance space, right? I still today I own an insurance consulting firm.
Mm.
And then now what I'm doing because my because is about legacy, I'm starting a platform for the modern leader, which is ironic that I'm on the modern man. But I love to draw that parallel because time evolves, right? And we're in an age now where things evolve at a much faster rate
Mm.
than they ever have. And so that means that, employees are more modernized. It doesn't mean younger, we're just more modernized. Buyers are more modernized. That means that leaders have to be more modernized as well too. And so for me, it's about to continue to evolve, and that's why I put my because in front of me every day.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And again, watching the game, staying ahead of things, and paying close attention to where the world is going and what's happening, which is, like you
Yeah,
mentioned, ironically, the modern man is the ever evolving man with the foundations of that masculinity that we hold pushing forward. And for a lot of us, some people might say, okay, there's something about him, or like he's just got this thing that like, just he walks in a room and boom, like you could just feel that aura of somebody will, he's got it, or he's got this it factor, or the Mick factor. Talk about the Mick factor and what that entails and how people could tap into that so they can push forward and lean on the pillars of the Mick factor for their potential and their personal growth.
yeah. You sound like my mentor, Les Brown, right there, man, because he's the one that coined that phrase, the Mick factor. And so he took my initials and said, you've got something here. Like everything about you is built on pillars. And so he was like, if we broke your name down, MICK, right? The M is for mastery, the I is imagination or innovation, the C is character, and the K is to keep going. And for me, not just for leaders, but for everyone, those are the pillars. Like those actually were my pillars without utilizing my initials, but mastery. Bruce Lee says, I fear not the man that practices over 10,000 kicks once. I fear the man that practices one kick 10,000 times. And to me, that's what mastery is. It's about truly honing in on your craft, not just wanting to do something to do it, but mastery is what separates us, right? Imagination is the difference between repeating what's been done and creating what's next,
Mhm.
right? And so for me, that's what imagination. I always tell people the story of Henry Box Brown, and I'm sure you don't know who Henry Box Brown is, Ted, but Henry Brown was a slave in the 1800s, and he, with his imagination, his family had separated from him. They were sold, and then ended up in a spot up north where they were free. He put himself in a box, had someone nail it in, and he shipped himself to freedom, right? If that's not imagination, good Lord, right? And then the character is what we all say that we have as one of our core pillars. But, character is about what people trust when the stakes are high or who people trust when the stakes are high. And if you're not that person, it says a lot about your character. And then keep going. I don't care who you are, what position in life you're in, you're going to face obstacles. And you're going to face obstacles more often than you're actually going to win, right? Because the road to winning once, you might have to overcome 4 or 5 obstacles to get to that one win. So you're always going to have more obstacles than you have wins in life. And it's how do you keep going through that? Because again, when we talk about separating good from great, it's those that continue to keep going that got there,
Mhm.
right? Like everyone that you see that's a superstar, that's a rock star, that's wealthy, they all face challenges. They just didn't quit.
Mhm.
And so the Mick Factor is about embodying all of that to be the best version of yourself that you can be. So for mastery, imagination, character, and the power to keep going.
How do you touch others with these pillars? How do you inspire others? Because we've heard the whole saying of you could lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? Or how do you let the horse
Yeah.
know it's thirsty? I imagine as you lead your businesses and as you inspire and impact people, not just the Mick factor that you possess, which let's not gloss over the fact that you said I sound like Les Brown, probably the best compliment I've received on this podcast, hands down.
If iron sharpens iron, so does one man sharpen another. But if you're a man and you're alone or listening to this, then who sharpens you? What's going on, guys? Ted Phaeton here, host of the Modern Man Podcast, also founder of the Noble Knights Mastermind Group. And I'm just out here encouraging you to find your circle. Maybe you're on a personal growth journey and nobody around you understands the new mentality that you're possessing. That's okay. You can find an online community that will pour into you, will navigate your goals and navigate your obstacles, share their experiences, resources, and more. Join the Noble Knights Mastermind Group and try us out for free to tap into a community of men helping each other scale up and reach their goals.
Check out themodernmanpodcast.com. But how do you take that spark that somebody might feel from a story, a speech, a book, a video, and keep that flame going with whether it be those pillars, the because? How do you reach out and maintain that growth for people?
Yeah, one of the things that I do, whether you work with me, we do workshops, or you hear me speak, is I tell you the first thing that you need to do for yourself in order to embody the Mick factor is to create standards. And I don't mean goals, I mean standards. And to me, a standard set is what's the least tolerable thing you will accept for yourself in whatever the category is. And that's your standard, right? Goals are very personal. And I'm not a goal person, but I am all about standards. And so the first thing you're going to do is create a standard. And for the leaders that I work with, I always tell people this leaders aren't born, right? Like leaders aren't born from talent, they're shaped by the perseverance to do work when nobody's watching. And so when you have a standard, you can then now build yourself upon those standards. And so with the Mick Factor, how do we keep people going and motivated? It's just that. It's let's create standards and let's live the standard. Mike Tomlin, the coach of the Steelers, was interviewed, yeah, it's probably last year, maybe the year before. And they were talking about the tradition at Pittsburgh, right? Because there's only been three coaches in the entire aura of Pittsburgh football, which is crazy when you look at other NFL teams.
Mhm.
And he said at Pittsburgh, the standard is the standard. And I immediately understood what he was saying because that's what I teach too. Like your standard has to be your standard. And so everyone that's listening, if you really want to compel, if you really want to move forward, if you really want to make that leap, the first thing you have to do is create a standard for yourself. Again, you could have 3 or 4 different categories that you're working on or that you believe in, but what's your standard for each of those categories? And that is where the Mick factor starts to take shape.
Man, that's fantastic. And one of the discussions we had just a couple weeks ago on the Noble Knights call was discussing that standard, not just with ourselves, but when it comes into hiring and when you're outsourcing, we find that other people might not hold the same standard. And it really becomes a culture. It really becomes
Yeah.
how you show up in your establishment, in your organization, the tone of which you set that other employees and those that are your subordinates will follow suit. And but that perfect example, you say the standard is just the standard. People are going to find out really quick. This is how we
Yep.
do things here. And if it's
Yep.
not how you're going to do things, you might not make it. Here's an interesting question that I'm just going off of my notes really quick of when we think about standards, because there might be some guys who fit this demographic in terms of they crush it at work and they do a great job, but they come home, their area's in disarray. They might slip a little bit in responsibilities when it comes to their personal lives, and they don't have the same standard at home that they do with work or in one arena than others. Is it possible to have a high standard in one arena and not so much in others, or can those bleed over into each other?
No, they should totally bleed over. I mean, you want to have your pillars for work, you want to have your pillars for your personal life, and you also want to have pillars for your legacy. And so you should have different sets of standards for the different aspects of your life. And one of the pieces of advice that I give men when I speak to men is this. And for all the fellas listening, let's come in a little closer. Start journaling. Start writing some of these things down, right? And here's why. I didn't start journaling until 10 years ago. So I'm not going to tell you that I've been a journaler all of my life. But what I will tell you is it's changed my life, right? It has totally changed my life by writing down those standards, by reflecting back on the week. And you don't have to write a novel daily. You don't have to write a novel weekly, but you should have a set of time or set some side of time to write, whether you're reflecting on something or whether there's an ambitious thing that you're working on personally or professionally, right? Or for your legacy. Write those things down. Like journaling is a big key. And to me, that's what helps me separate my business, my home, the legacy I'm building, the communities I'm building, or the relationships I'm trying to build. Like I journal everything. Again, my journal could be 2 sentences, right? But the fact that I'm writing it down means I'm putting purpose behind it, and it gives me something to go back and reflect to because we have so many moments in our lives, and you're never going to remember everything, especially as you get older. I can promise you that you're not going to remember everything. But if you write down key moments or key targets, that to me is another recipe for success.
Yeah, no, that's so powerful. And I say that as I have my journal right here. There's another one in my backpack, one in my
Right.
nightstand. And my wife will tell you they're almost always on or around my person because you never know when that thought will hit. You never know when something might spark, and you just want to write it down. And when you write it down, it helps offload some of the mental mental capacity that you have, and you get it out of your
Yeah.
brain and writing it down allows you to really analyze it in a different way. Um,
And here's what it also does for me, Ted. It makes me a better communicator, right?
mm,
Because now I write better, right? Again, I'm not writing a whole bunch of words, but I write better. I'm upgrading my vocabulary because I'm using words or I'm trying to define words or define words. And, it helps me just articulate better because I'm writing it down. And again, we're talking about the modern man and we're talking about the modern era. There are apps that you can speak into your phone as well too. So if you don't want to physically journal, you can at least verbally journal as well. But the key is to review whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah, and the key you touched on there when it comes to communication and speaking of the modern man, there is very something very very powerful to a man who can articulate what it is he's
Yes, sir.
feeling, what it is he wants, and what it is he needs, and that is very valuable to the business owners, to the fathers, to the husbands. That articulation and that clarity in your message can clean up so many conflicts that could arise from the misunderstandings that are bound to happen in our lives so many times. Um, Touching on the Mick factor, the mastery, I've told folks we say this big commitment of what do you want to do for the rest of your life? I like to say, what is something you can commit to for the next 10 years, right? Or the next
Yeah.
season and just commit and get better. And then the imagination is bringing it, like you mentioned, what's the next thing? Thinking outside the
Yeah.
box or the idea that there
Yeah.
is no box in the first place. um
Yeah.
the character, the person we hope to be in times of adversity.
Yeah.
And I feel a lot of those three get built by that last one, that keep going, that resilience. And I want to touch on hardships because I imagine from that promise you made at 10 years old to you starting the businesses in your 20s and getting the success moving forward, CEO, and then now coaching others, you mentioned there's more obstacles than wins.
Yeah.
How do we get over the hardships of life? Let's tap into that resilience really quick. If someone's looking to build resilience, because a lot of the men listening find themselves in a tough spot, just lost their job or the business isn't scaling the way it was. Maybe they had a great record year 2023, but 2024 is looking bleak and we're going into Q4 now and they're not sure how this holiday season is going to look, right?
Yeah.
What would you tell the guys in the thick of their storm, in the thick of their setback, how they can
Yeah.
overcome this hardship?
No, I love it, and I'm gonna keep using the analogy that you just did. I'm gonna talk about the thickness, right?
Mm,
Because I think that's a great parallel to obstacles and objections that we get. It's the thickness. Well, what I'm gonna tell you is to take that thickness and trim it to where it becomes thinner and thinner and thinner. The You don't climb a mountain and get to the top in 5 steps, right? You don't climb a mountain and even go up a straight trajectory, right? Like sometimes you got to go this way to get a better path and then come back here and it's going to take you longer but you're still going to the top. But what you're doing is finding your paths or building your path. So for the men that are listening, what I want you to focus on is take the big obstacle and break it down into smaller accomplishments. So, you know, you need to raise more money for Thanksgiving gifts, right? Like or Christmas gifts. Sorry, not, I'm sitting here because I got to plan a big Thanksgiving dinner, but you gotta go do some big purchases for Christmas, and you're trying to figure out well how, right? We'll start breaking it down. What's needed? Um, how much do things actually cost? Can I find another job or a way to supplement my income for this little bit of time? Are the gifts that are needed really needed? Right. But break things down into small and then start accomplishing those small things because big is always hard. Small is a little bit easy. So the obstacles that you have, the objections that you have, the adversity that you have, you're going to continue to face. It's going to build the character that you have, no pun intended, but if you have those standards that we talked about, it's going to help you get there. And more importantly, if your because is in front of you, you're going to get there. So to wrap that part up, Ted, what I'll say is take something big and break it into smaller rocks.
yeah, no, that's awesome. You know, the extraordinary things aren't the extra; it's the ordinary that's just a little bit done a little bit extra, and over
Yes,
time,
sir.
accounts and amounts to bigger and bigger things. You've alluded to a couple times the standard and showing your mother, your sister, how a man in the home should be. And being that
Yeah.
we're on the Modern Man podcast, and I talk about elevating our capacity for life because um, y- a lot of guys deal with burnout. they deal with the energy they have in their 20s doesn't quite have the same impact, the same flame in your
Yeah.
30s, and you can't just white knuckle it through life, and eventually burnout could hit, or you come into a hardship and it's just not working out the way you thought it was, and you're feeling the stress of things, but you still want to show up as that man you know you can be. Um,
Yeah.
touch on what the man in the home should look like, or the image that you've created, right? We've said before, no man is a template, but we can all pull the values and the best from others that we see and adapt to ourselves. So what are some of the avatars you've pulled from and how you've created yourself as a man?
Yeah, that's a great question. And here's the first thing I'm going to say to all the men, because I say this to myself every day too, is it's not about you, right? It's not about you. When you have a family, the most important thing that you can do is be present. Presence is a big deal. You're going through things, but you never understand the magnitude of how the reflection of you gives to others. And I can say that, growing up how I grew up, where, if I would have emulated what I saw in front of me, I wouldn't be the person that I am. And conversely, if there would have been a different image, I probably could have gotten to where I am much faster or better. And so it's not about you. Think about the image that you're giving off to those in the household, in your community, and be present. So that's number one. It's not about you, be present. And number two, find the surround yourself with like-minded men, right? I have this thing where I do a circle evaluation 2 times a year. It doesn't mean that I'm always kicking people out of the circle or always adding in, but I evaluate it because it's really important to understand, the quote, right? You're the average of the 5 or 6 people you surround yourself with. Well, it's true. Who are the people? Are they going through things? Are they not emulating? Do they not have their own standards? Like, what are the things that they're doing? And surround myself with those. And what's the character of the people? And I'm always trying to get better. So I never want to be the best in my circle. I probably want to be the least most of the time. And so it's how do I emulate the good things in different people? So, I'll take things from my uncles. I'll take things from my mentors, Les Brown and Damon John. I'll take things from my best friends because they all do something better than me at some aspect of whatever my core pillars are. And that's what drives me. It's all right, I need to emulate this aspect of a Darren Vermost or this aspect of a Chris Paradiso or this aspect of a Damon John because it's really important. This aspect of a Ted because it's really important and never be alone. I think,
Mhm.
the last thing I'll say about that is as men, right? We're supposed to have the answer, and it's too prideful for me to ask Ted for help. Well, actually, it's not, man. In this mental health state, in this mental health advocacy that I do, the best thing you can do is just, I don't want to say be vulnerable, but open up. It's okay to open up. It's okay for me to ask Ted questions. Hey, Ted, I'm struggling with this in the home, man. Like, do you have some advice for me? Right? As men, we don't have to always have the answers. We can go to our circle, we can go to our friends and get it. And that's what I do, right? Like I'm not trying to emulate one person or be a version of me that I can't be, but I am definitely trying to improve the version of me every day. And so if Ted does something great, or if I see Ted's going through something that I'm about to go through or that I'm going through, I'm going to go get Ted's wisdom on that because
Yeah.
I don't need to experience something if Ted's already done it. Right? Like, they tell you that experience is the best teacher. It's the biggest lie that we've ever been told. It's not experience, it's wisdom.
Yeah.
Wisdom is the best teacher. So if Ted's going through something, I don't need to experience what Ted went through if he can give me the wisdom on how to fix it, right? Or how to avoid it. And so for men, we've got to be able to understand the difference between experience and wisdom and always see wisdom from those.
Yeah, man, that's fantastic. It reminds me of a quote that was said earlier on an episode, and I've said it since, and it said, "Experience is the teacher of fools," because we have to figure it out on our own. And I spent a lot of my teens and my 20s doing that until somewhere around the age of 27, 28. It got tiring. And I realized everything I dealt with, it was my father, my uncle, some of my friends who tried to warn me. And despite their counsel, I went ahead anyway.
That was wisdom. Wisdom was trying to help you out, brother.
Yeah, and I didn't listen, but but finally I wised up. I said, "You know what? Let me actually listen to some of the people ahead of me who are doing the things that I'm trying to do." And that's an important caveat as well, because you mentioned seeking the counsel of others, and I love and I respect that you mentioned me, because Mick, I'd love to call you and ask you for advice as well for certain things, because we don't always have to look at uh, the big entrepreneurs or the big rich successful people for the things that we want. Case in point, I had a mentor who was very successful in business, and this mentor was traveling around the country. He ironically was also working in insurance, and he spent over 150 nights in a hotel. And I remember my wife saying, "You're getting a lot of advice and you're getting a lot of mentorship from so and so." And I told her, I said, "Listen, baby, if ever there's a problem with our relationship, I don't call that person for mentorship in marriage. I call my friend who has 3 kids, married 20 plus years, for any advice I can get when it comes to fostering a loving marriage. When it comes to
Yeah.
business, I'm calling my friend because he's widely successful in business. But just like you mentioned, we can seek the wise counsel of others when they're in the positions where we hope to find ourselves. And not one person can give us everything, but we can use our discernment to find out the responsible parties who have the things that we want and can help guide us through that experience that we're hoping to embark on. Um, one couple last questions as we come up on our time here. And I want to touch on the legacy aspect of, you mentioned a couple times of the legacy, not just for your kids, but the our kids kids and the kids we might never get to meet.
Yeah.
What does that legacy look like for what you're building, and what can other men maybe tap into and adopt for the legacy they hope to build?
Yeah, man. Like one of the things that, Jerome Bettis hit on it in his Hall of Fame speech, and it's something that my grandfather had said to me too. So this isn't a quote from me by any stretch of imagination, but you know, you come into the world, you're born with a name, right? And your job is to make sure that that name, while you're here, is good. But more importantly, when you are no longer here, it's a name that can go on a statue somewhere, right? And so for me, it's the legacy of a name, and it's keeping that name clean, keeping that name pure, and that's done by decision making. You've heard me talk about decision making a lot because that's the essential thing that drives everything that we do. Every outcome that we're going to have is based on a decision that we make, no matter how big or how small. And so I want to make sure that my kids have a great representation of something. I want to make sure that my clients have a great representation of something. And so for all the men that are listening, I'm going to tell you the one thing that you have is a name, and it's your job to keep it as clean as you can. And that doesn't matter if you've made bad choices. You can still clean it up, right? It's what are you going to live with and what are you going to leave in the future? And so for me, that's what it's about. Legacy is about keeping that name pure, whether that's your name, if you own a business, your business name, or both. It's about what are you doing so that 200 years from now, people still know and remember who you are. And that's what it's about.
That's fantastic. And just that caveat for everybody is, the brands, and I say that in air quotes, that we're surrounded by are names. The Ferraris of the world, the Gucci's, these are
Right.
all names. And we
Names.
we
Right.
wear other names on our back. We wear other names on our jerseys for the players that we watch on Sundays, because we
Yep.
glorify what they've been able to do with it. If only we could
Yep.
show the same pride for our name, and we could have
Yep.
that same motivation and that same because behind where we take our name moving forward. I know a lot of listeners, Mick, they're looking at their name, and they're looking at the legacy, they're looking at the Mick factor, and they're ready to go. And this is that spark we talked about before that could feed the flame and keep it burning. And I want to make sure that our listeners and our audience have a way to keep getting the fuel from the fire you provide. So, what are some of the best links for folks to follow you, connect with you, see some of the work that you're doing, and even reach out and work with you if they're ready?
Yeah, I mean, definitely reach out, and it doesn't have to be a work with me aspect, right? Like I'm a giver by nature, so definitely hit me up wherever. So on LinkedIn, it's Mick Hunt. On Instagram, it's Mick Unplugged, and I'm usually on those two platforms. MickUnplugged.com is the website that'll get you links to me, some of the things I'm doing with leadership, and some of the podcasts. But definitely don't hesitate to reach out to me, right? Like I promise you I'll answer questions. I'm very engaged with the people that I connect with. So definitely hit me up. LinkedIn, Instagram, go to micunplug.com and I'm there.
I'll have those links in the show notes and in the description below for folks watching on YouTube. Mick Hunt, this has been great. I have one more question, and it's usually the heaviest. I save it for the end. And we might have touched on it already, and that's okay. But what is something that's happened to you or something you've seen that shapes the way you view the world as a man?
Wow, that's a great question. I've never been asked that question before.
Thank you.
You know, I would definitely go back to decision making. So, again, you're going to get faced with obstacles, and it's the decisions that you make that really get you to those wins. And so, that's the thing I stress is making the right decision, not the popular decision, right? I will tell people all the time when I see people struggling or I see businesses struggling, I always go back to, all right, let's talk about some decisions that you had to make and what decisions were those that you made. And every answer is always in the decisions that we make. So for all the men out there, everything is about the decisions. Decision making is a trait that you learn and you develop and you grow over time. Start making the right decision, not the popular decision. If we were to go back into my time, I didn't always get it right, right? I learned from them, but I'm very comfortable making the right decision versus the popular. So, decisions like what college am I going to go to? Doesn't seem like it's that important, but it was in my life. When am I going to start this business? Am I going to go seek funding or do it on my own? Those are questions that I have in life, right? Like when it's time to raise my kids, like the time that my parents always said no and I didn't understand, right? So it's like, oh, now I get why they told me no because if they just said yes, I would just get used to asking questions all the time, right? So the decisions that you make with your kids and your family also very important. So get used to making decisions, the right decision, because when you start thinking about the decisions you make, you realize how many decisions you make in a day, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of things we take for granted, but we make a ton of decisions every day. Start
Yeah.
making the right
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I always tell guys on the call, this phone, when it rings, when it buzzes, when it hums, and when it vibrates, usually somebody on the other side needs something. And it's they need
one.
something and they need me to make a decision, they need me to provide. And that could be taxing, but it's our skill set to have the discernment and the understanding of what to do next that really
Yeah,
cultivates that value that we have. So decisions wholeheartedly agree with that. CEO, keynote speaker, Forbes Council member, executive coach, podcast host of Mick Unplugged. Mick Hunt, thank you so much for being on the show today, man.
Ted, I appreciate you, brother, more than you know.
I appreciate you too, especially that you talked about that big Thanksgiving dinner that we're all going to be having. Now that we're cousins, I'll be coming through. Dinner's at 7.
Hey, you come through. Dinner is when you get here, bro.
Fair
That
enough.
could right.
I'll be in sweats too, with plenty of extra room. But I'm going to share some of the gems that you left along the way. And I'll be honest, I almost ran out of areas to write my notes down because a lot of our listeners are either driving, working out, cleaning while listening. So I love to recap some of the gems that our guests give. And Mick, you gave us a lot. Trying to find a way for your mom. A lot of us in life have something that can trigger the because, not just the why, but the because, and tapping into that really can help us push forward into that vision and that life that we're
Yeah,
all chasing. Let me deal
yeah,
with the monster. To think of a 10-year-old with uh, the bravery and the commitment to say, let me handle it. But a lot of us have that instinct within us, especially as men. We want to step up. We look for that opportunity to provide and to protect and to be that rock when needed. And speaking of opportunity, don't get caught watching the ball. Watch the game, move your feet, tap into that because, and pay attention so you can take advantage of those opportunities. And like Mick's mom said, don't miss. Don't miss. Be prepared. And again, following that because so you can change, tapping into the Mick factor, your mastery, your imagination, your character, keep going, that persistence to get over the obstacles that, as Mick mentioned, you'll have more of those than your wins. So it's important to be resilient and create a standard. The least tolerable thing you'll accept in any arena of life. What is that? And that standard becomes the culture in your business, becomes the standard in your family, the values that you tap in, and the masculine frame that you hold within your home. Start journaling, write it down, get it out of your head, get it on paper, read it back, learn from it, learn to articulate yourself and communicate, and then trim the thickness. Life can get rough at times. That storm could be heavy and the obstacle could be thick, but you don't have to eat the whole elephant. You just need to take one bite at a time. Trim that thickness little by little. And it's not about you. It's not about you, fellas, in your home, in your business, in your lives, in your community, in your church, in your family. Just be present. Be present because the presence that you provide impacts your surroundings so much. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure to reach out to Mick Hunt. If you guys enjoyed this podcast, it would mean the world to me if you hit that like button and subscribe button. Share this with somebody else you know can get value from it as well. Mick and I were cooking through this episode, so you got a lot to eat from. Hopefully you're full, and I would love for you to share that as well. And leave us a rating to let us know how we're doing. That's the only way we can get better, and you have no idea how much that helps us with the algorithm on all of the platforms. So I would love to hear your feedback. But as we always say at the end of the episode, guys, everybody wants the sunshine, but they don't want the rain. But you can't get the pleasure without first the pain. Let's grow.